Welcome to the SportsPro Podcast.
Hi everyone, and welcome once again to the SportsPro Podcast. My name is Eoin Connolly. I'm the editor at large at SportsPro. Hope you're all very well indeed. Happy to have you all back with us, and very happy to welcome the Commissioner of the National Women's Soccer League, Lisa Baird. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, how are you, Owen?
I'm well, Lisa. How are you?
I'm good. We're just back from Utah from our tournament, so just getting back in the thick of things.
Great stuff. Although there's lots to dive into there. We're also going to be hearing a little bit later on the podcast a bit of a recent conversation between our deputy editor Sam Carp and the FIFA head of women's football Sarai Bareman. So keep an ear out for that. But yeah, lots to talk about in the world of women's football, and specifically, Lisa, in the National Women's Soccer League. You are what are we? We're talking on the Thursday after your season, the Thursday after the Sunday. For your 2020 tournament. How did all of that go? Obviously, very strange circumstances, but great to have got some games played.
Yeah, we just played 23 total games in Utah over 33 days. We were in what everybody now is terming the bubble, the protected environment, where we kind of had brought in 8 teams. And we had put together a really exciting, intense format of group play with a knockout round of quarterfinals, semis, and championships. And in addition to, kind of making sure that all the rigorous medical protocols were in place, we also wanted to really overachieve our goals in terms of introducing NWSL to American fans. So a lot of big goals, and I think we're pretty satisfied with how we achieved them.
Yeah, I mean, you've almost just got out of the bubble. I understand you just had a test, a kind of a re-entry test.
Yes, our medical protocols have us testing pre going into the bubble and then doing one final test coming home. And even the staff was required to observe all the protocols, which we did over the course of 33 days. So I still don't have my results yet. They're a little bit longer now on this side of it, but I'm really proud to say that during the course of the tournament, we had no positive tests, meaning that's not positive news. It's when you have no positive tests, you have zero COVID. So that was our most important objective, the health and wellness of our players. And we were so thrilled to be able to achieve it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of effort obviously goes into um, into putting that kind of bubble environment together, and I feel like I'm asking a lot of rights holders this at the moment. But basically, when you were faced with that prospect, what convinced you basically to go through with the behind closed doors bubble, heavily protocoled season, given all of the all of the work and all of the resources that entails.
Well, I think, early on when after we shut down the season, I joined as commissioner on March 10th. On March 12th, we shut down the season and it was the entire sports industry shut down overnight worldwide. We started looking around for a playbook to enable us to get back to live sports. And it quickly became apparent to me and the doctors that we were working on was that there was none. And we talked a lot. I talked to some of my colleagues at other leagues, other commissioners, and I really thought that even though it wasn't proven that the best chance we had to protect players was to do the concept of a protected environment, a bubble. And that was just me doing my market research. But I think I was also heavily influenced by the Olympic Games. And, after 10 years in the Olympic movement, we actually do that. I mean, if you think about it, an Olympic Games is sort of like that, not from a safety and wellness standpoint, but from the fact that you can protect your delegation within a village and with, protocols on how to be at a games, even if you're in a foreign country. So that was a model that I kind of had some familiarity with, although we'd never done it from a medical standpoint. So we selected that. We looked around at where in the United States seemed to be the best place for us, which was a combination of having the facilities, having a team in that place that could be a host city, but also where the rise in the incidence of COVID was still very low. And that's when we selected Utah. So the combination of the protocols that we wanted and having a host city like Salt Lake City, which met all of our requirements, was the key to us pushing the button and moving ahead. And to this day, I think there are other leagues that are having success in the bubble, and now it's up to all of us to figure out how that works in a more traditional season format, until such time as we have a vaccine and we have a fair amount of population vaccinated against it.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that's been a pretty significant topic of conversation on this side of the Atlantic, where we've seen several major soccer leagues come back. I think this is probably is the most pertinent example. Other sports have come back as well, but those major leagues have come back, and only the Frauen Bundesliga of those has had its women's equivalent play under these conditions. So the investment has only been there. It's been very heavily tied to kind of broadcast rights deals and so forth. But there hasn't been the same kind of support to getting women's football back on screen over these past few months. How important was that knowledge that you were going to have that visibility after the Women's World Cup last year, which obviously the US national team won, and given the hunger that there was, and given the interest that there wasn't in having some live sport back?
Well, I think it was an enormous driver for us. But I wouldn't say that we're unique in that from every other sports league. We knew we wanted to capitalize on the momentum. We knew we wanted to use the opportunity um, of the World Cup, not only for our U.S. players, but for the 58 international players that play in our league, to go back to live sports. And I think that's where creating the type of tournament we did, which was a compressed period of time, but filling that void with an international style tournament, became really the catalyst to getting not only avid football fans, but casual sports fans to engage with our league, find out who our teams were, engage with many more of our players. And we're really pleased with the audience that we were able to generate and deliver on.
And yeah, let's talk about that audience, because you've had some really quite promising figures coming out of your broadcast with CBS.
Yes, we were, and Twitch as well. So because of the shortened season, we had to re-engage with our two partners, Twitch and CBS, and really, figure out what was the best way to bring the most audience to the tournament. So in the United States and Canada, CBS carried the opening game and the championship game on CBS, where it's rated, and then in between we were on their streaming service, CBS All Access. So we set a new record for the opening game. I think it was 572, and then we really set another new record for the championship game. And I'm looking at the number right now. I think it's six. Was it 672? 673. I'm now getting my number wrong. So we really were really pleased with with that audience. But what was really outstanding was, even though the games were not on at very great times outside the US, we were able to deliver a great audience outside the US and Canada with Twitch. And those numbers came out, and we were really pleased with the hours watched at Twitch. And I should have written them down for this. I'll bring them up, but we in Twitch were really pleased with that. And just to hear outside the US the engagement from countries like Brazil, with world marquee players like Dabinia, and certainly with Rachel Daly coming out of the UK, it was really exciting to get those kinds of numbers.
And did you have to come up with a different kind of strategy for this kind of, for the Challenge Cup? Because obviously it's a very different product. It's a very different kind of tournament, different time frames. and so forth, and different peaks and narratives and everything else. Did you have to develop a different media strategy with Twitch and CBS?
Um, I think we are, and I think that uses the best of both. Um, and I'd say we're the first of a 4-year relationship with CBS and 3 with Twitch, so we're really learning it. But with Twitch, and I'll start there. Early on, when we didn't have the live games to stream on Twitch except outside the US. Early on, we just started to experiment with archival games. And this season to date, which includes the tournament, we had over 335,000 hours of content watched, and we're really pleased with the peak average minute audience for the Championship Cup of 19,000 viewers. That is really pretty amazing. So, what is exciting about that is how the Twitch viewers really engage with the game. And so, I think you'll see us do more things with influencers in the future, and more things with different types of teams. And certainly, I really want to try and optimize the times for the international audience, because I do think that showed us we can bring in an international audience with the quality of product that we have, and the players who are appealing outside. With CBS, it's really about promoting it, introducing people to the league, making sure they follow teams, more of a traditional growth there. But our ratings show we can deliver a very, very decent football audience, and we're definitely in the ballpark for where MLS, WNBA are delivering. And I think people were a bit surprised to see that in the United States, that even though both MLS and WNBA have many, many years on us in terms of building their fan base, and building what they're doing, that really with our first time out with a network broadcast agreement, that we were doing really good numbers. So it just shows to the health of women's football.
You're listening to the SportsPro Podcast.
Now, let's try and take the conversation out of the context of the pandemic for a little bit, and out of the context of 2020. Go back to or out of the context of what 2020 has become, and go back to February when you joined the league. I mean, what were your thoughts about it? What had attracted you to it, and also how would you characterize the challenge that you saw in front of you?
Well, there were really only 2 days I had where, I interviewed with our owners in January, February, and I kind of had a long term vision, because I think the United States and North America in particular is in really good shape for an explosion of interest, fans, and media coverage of soccer. And if you look at the next decade for us in particular, I think we're going to have a great, continued great engagement because of 2 Women's World Cup. One in a very, Australia actually is a pretty friendly time zone, believe it or not, for the United States. So from an audience perspective, but we have Australia, New Zealand, and then 27 is up for bid for Women's World Cup, but we have a North America Men's Cup in 26, which is really exciting for soccer in the United States, and then we have the 2028 Olympics, where we're pretty sure soccer is going to get huge coverage again, not only because LA is a very football friendly town with 2 major MLS teams, but last week we announced that we are engaged with an ownership group in LA to bring an NWSL franchise to LA. So if you look at it, like with the continued growth that we have with our league, the continued attraction of international players, the continued build out of what we're going to do with expansion markets on our own, and then you kind of turbocharge that with 2 Women's World Cups, a home Men's World Cup in 26, and then the Olympics at home. I think our future is pretty bright.
Do you think? I mean, this isn't the first go at a for all the kind of longevity and the interest in women's soccer in the US, this wasn't the first go. It is now well established. We're a good few years into the life of the NWSL. But what's the difference between establishing that interest in individual players and in the national team, and establishing a professional league as a going concern that has that kind of, I guess it's kind of a networked appeal, isn't it, where you have different teams who will have different followers as well.
Yeah, it's just the same as it is in Europe, in the US, but like having parity within the team so that, every season is a new chance for a new champion. Um, every, and I think we showed that with this tournament. I mean, North Carolina Courage has been a perennial powerhouse and they will continue to be. They have a culture there that is very strong. They have great ownership, an incredible coach in Paul Ryan. Some of the world's marquee players, both from the U.S. Women's National Team as well as outside from other countries. And I think everybody came in and it's going to be another North Carolina champion because they were, it would have been a three-peat. But here comes Houston out of nowhere, and they don't have any U.S. Women's National Team players. They have Rachel Daly, who, was just a powerhouse, and Shea Groom, another powerhouse from Texas. And it just shows what parity does for a league. And we have 9 teams, each with its own um, portfolio of stars and experience, but also up and comers. The goalie from Houston, Jane Campbell. I can start to recite names that Sky Blue, a team that had not done well in previous seasons and made it into the quarterfinals and had a very, very strong game and audience with the Chicago Red Stars, with a brand new coach, a female coach, by the way, Freya, and a team that didn't have its customary stars. Carly Lloyd, a huge name for Sky Blue in New York, New Jersey, was out with an injury. But people like Midge Purse became people following, and it just shows how things can shift when you're building a league. That's different from a national team where you're capitalizing on the peak that is your World Cup every 4 years or your Olympic Games. And I think that that's where we're going to continue to drive, is to make sure that the quality of the players, the player pools, remain strong. And we do believe it's there. Even as we expand, we believe that we can expand the player pool. And part of it is developing that reputation as a great professional league to attract players from all over the world.
And similarly, you spent a number of years with the USOPC as chief marketing officer. You worked, it's an organization that creates or works with a lot of stars of women's sport, and it always has. You think of some of the absolute biggest personalities, some of the most famous global stars of women's sport come out of American Olympic teams in a whole range of disciplines.
Yeah.
How does that challenge compare? I mean, I'm guessing there's going to be some similarities in the comparison between that and what you'd be doing with the US national team, but how does that compare? And what I guess for professional women's team sport to progress, what transitions need to happen between what's successful in that context and what will work in this one?
Well, I think there's 3 things. Number one is, to me, the thing that I walked away from the Olympics with, and frankly, I'll give a lot of credit to NBC, who was the longtime Olympic partner in the United States, but also, what um, the IOC has done recently with the Olympic Channel is telling the stories of the athlete stories, introducing them. Because remember, there's a cycle to this, and we're going to have that cycle where you always want to introduce the newest athletes. Who are they? You have to establish that every time. So that rhythm of telling stories and telling them well is really important. Really important for us to take as a practice across our league, so that people are knowing the players, they follow the players. That creates the national audience. But the other thing that I think is different from, well, it's a little different from the Olympics, But taking a lesson from other sports is we're going to have rivalries within our league. We're going to have games that have extraordinary impact at the moment in time. And so being able to optimize the schedule to take advantage of every single chance to engage a ticket buyer or a sponsor or a rating, an audience on TV, that is about the magic of the excitement of being in a league. And I miss that at the USOPC where it's so condensed and it happens in just 3 weeks. Whereas we are going to fully take advantage of the longer schedule that we have to use that to engage more people and create true followership. That's kind of an objective for us going into 21.
Yeah. You'll have a new team, not in 21, but in by 22. Your 11th team out in Los Angeles.
Well, actually, we'll be expanding. We're expanding with a new team in 21, which is Louisville, Racing Louisville. So we do have a new team coming in 21. And then as we figure out everything with LA, a new team, at least one new team in 22.
Sure.
So expansion is a big part of what we're doing.
Yeah, but I wanted to talk about Angel City specifically because of some of the people who are involved with it. Obviously, you have Alexis Ohanian,
Yes.
you have Natalie Portman, uh, and a kind of a range of other investors as well who kind of go out into that tech world and also the entertainment and wider media world that you get out in LA. How significant is the involvement of some of these people going to be in the NWSL project as well as in Los Angeles?
Well, I think we've already seen it. I mean, they approach it differently. They're building out of their social fan base, and their engagement from the outset has been incredible. And I think I saw, and I'm going to look for another data point for us, but I think literally since launch, they might have built a social following of 60,000. That's in a week. And I think that's the power of how, you know, entertainment, sports, and digital come together. I mean, uh, Alexis kind of does this in his sleep. So with because these lessons are really well learned from Reddit. So they've already brought on 60,000 followers. They had 1 million views in 36 hours. And an estimated media value just in with zero marketing spend of 31 million across everything they did with the extraordinary reception to the launch. I mean, I think that is the value of having the diversity of ownership they have and then building out in the community. I mean, just having the representatives they have from the 99 team, which is the storied U.S. women's team, is huge. So there's a new supporters group out there, and like building that and feeding that really well is really important. It's called Rebellion 99. Is feeding that. That's what comes from approaching it as a hybrid between sport, entertainment, and digital. And I think the sky's the limit for this team. But I also think it's not going to be the only strong team. I'm very excited about the reception in Louisville to this team coming out. They're already well on their way to their ticket sales for next year, and that's hard to do with within what's happening right now, the disruption of the pandemic. So they are really on their way with ticket sales, and Racing Louisville will bring its own authentic cultural approach to the sport. So it's not just the big markets; it's also the smaller markets as well. And they have a beautiful new stadium.
Yeah, and I mean just to stay on that idea of the people who are coming in, um, the people who are going to be involved with the franchise in LA, but also people who are becoming involved in women's sport more generally. What an opportunity is there if you take that approach of courting um, courting a different kind of media growth? I guess you're already doing that a little bit with Twitch, but looking earlier at some of the new opportunities that it might take bigger organizations longer to redirect themselves towards. And also, just having different champions for you in the public space, different uh, people who speak to different audiences.
Well, that's exactly right. I think you said it. I mean, Natalie Portman, Alexis Ohanian, they're giving us a whole new hook into a whole new audience for us. And as I've always said, like we have a very, very avid, engaged core group of women's soccer fans. Now it's time for us to compete for casual fans. And I think we can. And we can go into casual sports fans or, just sports fans and not just soccer fans and really develop a following because of who our players are and the markets we're in. And that's where, having the ability to get introduced with a Natalie Portman or Alexis, or, even in Louisville with that team, James Harden came out and did a lot for us with Houston.
Just a couple of things before um, before we wrap up. That how is the challenge different for an emerging league from what it might have been, uh, say 5 or 10 years ago, and how how's that path to growth differ now?
You know what, that is what I'm dealing with right now. So, I think we're going to have to be really mindful of how do you grow in a pandemic, and this goes back to some of the things I started the call with. Like, I think medical protocols and doing this for the health and wellness, that's here to stay. Um, that is here to stay. So everything that we do right now is really important to do. With a how is the health and safety of our players guaranteed. So that's a whole new dimension to what we're doing going forward. How will that affect the schedule in 21? We've had major disruption in the US with college sports. The draft is a way that a lot of players get into our league. We are really we're dealing with disruption ourselves. So the fact that we did the tournament well gives us confidence in our protocols, and it gives us a confidence in our collaboration with our PA that will always be the grounding for what we do going forward.
And finally, I mean, I'm sure you get this question all the time, and I know because I've read it and I've seen it. But the you're the female head of a female sports league. I guess the prerogative at the moment is normalizing female sports and making it a part of the mainstream, but also normalizing female leadership, not just in sport, but in a whole range of public contexts. How would you advise people following you to do that, and how would you advise people in your position, and how do you try to make that possible?
Well, let me take the first is, the fact that of all sports coverage, only 4% of it is on women's sports is not normal. It's not normal. I mean, I don't know what the right percentage is, but 4% is not the right percentage. So continuing to tell the story and prove with facts and fans that we deserve more coverage is really important for anybody who leads a women's sports league or is a player or anything. And I think that's going to continue to be a hill that we all have to climb in sports. And I don't think just women should be leading that push. I think it should be companies. I think it should be media broadcasters. It should be journalists. Like, there is no reason why only 4% of media covers women's sports. The second piece of it is leadership. And, I think it was, a while ago, I was on a panel, and, everybody always sees these lists that journalists come up with and say, here's the top 50 most powerful people in sports. And I just, at that point in time, I'd become a little frustrated with it. And I said, look, I'm going to stop looking up and I'm going to start looking down. How do I create opportunity for people who I work with, talent that I see, younger people coming out of college, to create more opportunity for women so that the path under me is clear and I can influence that greater than I can upward. So that became kind of my mission. And I'm really pleased that, I've really been able to do that with a lot of the companies I've touched and sports that I've touched, to create opportunities and influence for women coming along the path. I always talk about Rainey Anderson. She was a talent that I saw way early on at the NFL, as was Tracy Perlman. Both of them are now in very senior leadership positions. Rainey's an EVP at the NFL, impacting a lot of that league. But that's not the only one in the Olympic and Paralympic movement, working with any number of companies. Janet Fletcher at P&G, she's become a rock star in sports. I've just really tried to carve out opportunity for up and coming women. That's how I can be most influential.
Yeah, and for those up and coming women, what would you recommend as a way of differentiating yourself in terms of talent and in terms of what you have to offer?
It's a great question. I think, look, I think if the tournament proved anything, it's that a women's league, a women commissioner, dominant female staff. My head of operations is a woman. My general counsel is a woman. My head of business development is a woman. Like, I think we just approach things, with facts and passion and end-to-end solutions, like really good, disciplined thinking and fast, dynamic action. And I think that's not so much a female trait as it is a successful trait in business. I think taking risks is something that a lot of people need to do well in sports, but I'm only comfortable, and I would say I'm only comfortable if it's a measured risk. I don't think taking, like, just hoping things go well in this kind of environment is a good idea. I think you really have to do a lot of due diligence and do that hard. So I think measured risk is a good idea. I think facts is always a good idea. I think having passion and um, pursuing that is really, like, that's the secret, I guess, for all people, not just women.
Okay, thanks very much, Lisa.
All right. Thank you so much. And Owen, I'll hopefully be crossing paths with you again.
Let's hope so.
All right. Take care.
Help us spread the word about the SportsPro Podcast. Subscribe, like and share our content on social. Join the conversation on Twitter with the hashtag SportsProPod. And if you're enjoying our work, why not leave us a rating and a nice review on your podcast platform of choice? And if you want to get in touch, you can send us an email, podcast@sportspromedia.com. The SportsPro Podcast. We're listening too.
Okay, well, we talked a little bit there about the impact of the 2019 FIFA Women's World Cup and the need for the game to maintain some momentum off the back of that. Obviously, that's been checked a little bit by the pandemic, but there's still a lot of optimism about the future. Australia and New Zealand will be staging the next edition of that tournament. And a few weeks ago, Sam Carp, the SportsPro deputy editor, spoke to the FIFA chief women's football officer, Sarai Bareman, about pushing on towards that tournament and about the progress of the sport more generally. And we've got some of that interview for you just after this.
This is the SportsPro Podcast.
Sarai Bareman, thanks very much for joining us on the SportsPro Podcast. First of all, how have you been keeping, or even coping, I suppose might be an equally appropriate word during the strange situation we've found ourselves in over the past few months?
Thanks very much, Sam. It's a pleasure to speak with you again. Well, I've been coping quite well, to be honest. In Switzerland, where I'm based, the government reacted very well to the coronavirus situation. We, of course, were in lockdown for some time, working from home, but that certainly didn't stop the volume of work that was coming in. And if anything, it increased it during that lockdown period, just especially in terms of keeping in touch with our stakeholders and trying to understand, in fact, how the virus was impacting them. But personally have remained healthy. My family is healthy, thank God. And happy to slowly see things heading back towards normality now.
Good stuff. That's great to hear. I mean, we've obviously got plenty of ground to cover. I think it was as we were saying, it's sort of about 12 months since you and I last spoke in the build-up to the 2019 Women's World Cup in France. But I kind of wanted to start with something a little bit more recent. Obviously, the news that Australia and New Zealand will be co-hosting the 2023 Women's World Cup. The first time that either of those two countries have staged the event. Just keen to get your kind of, your initial reaction to that. I mean, I'm not sure how neutral you had to remain in your role, but as a Kiwi, I'm sure a big part of you is delighted that New Zealand and Australia will be staging the event.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a very exciting announcement. Not only from a personal perspective because of New Zealand obviously being one of the co-hosts, but just also that we can now start working towards the next edition of our showpiece tournament. With some clear parameters in place now that we know who the hosts are going to be. But obviously during the process I had to remain completely neutral. I didn't want to kind of tarnish the process in any way, particularly when we had put so much effort into making sure that we had a very transparent process in place. And I even went to the extent of, not involving myself at all in any of the kind of inspection visits and evaluation visits, just because I wanted to create that degree of separation. That transparency aspect for me is very, very important.
I was just going to say, because obviously that FIFA's own evaluation report obviously ranked the Trans-Tasman bids the highest, citing a multitude of reasons. Obviously, the overriding ones being the existing infrastructure and kind of the fact that it represented the most sort of commercially favourable proposition. But I mean, sort of knowing that part of the world as you do, what do you think that Australia and New Zealand will bring as hosts of a Women's World Cup?
Well, I think the culture is the first thing that comes to my mind. Especially in New Zealand, which is where I grew up, there's a beautiful Indigenous culture in the country that kind of permeates through everything in society there. And it's something that, having now lived in Europe for some time, I look on as a real treasure. And to be able to expose the rest of the world to that through the hosting of the Women's World Cup is something that I think is going to be very special. But outside of that, obviously, there's a huge interest in sports in that region, particularly in Australia. There's a very competitive environment domestically for female sports. And there's been a massive uptake in recent times in terms of participation and interest in women's football. I think obviously the two countries are also very experienced in hosting and delivering high-level sporting events. We expect it's going to be an incredible tournament from every aspect.
Yeah, I mean, I know ultimately came down to those two bids. It was obviously Australia and New Zealand, and then one from Colombia. But I mean, the process started out with 9 expressions of interest, I think it was. Then there were sort of 4 left standing after it was announced the tournament would be expanded to 32 teams, and then finally it was ultimately those 2. But I mean, how do you kind of look back on the bidding process and the levels of interest in hosting the event that were shown? Maybe in comparison to previous years, was it kind of testament to sort of some of the work that's been done, and especially the success of last year's event?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very indicative of the level of interest in the women's game having grown exponentially around the world. It's clear to me that those member associations and bidding countries see that there's a clear benefit from hosting the Women's World Cup. And, it was exciting to see such a high level of interest. As you said, 9 countries putting forward initial indications of interest at the start of the process. That was a record for us for the women's tournament. And I think that's something that we can't ignore. I mean, there's a high level of interest and it's only going to increase over time. But in the end, as you said, it came down to 2. Colombia put up a really good fight. That's a country that obviously lives and breathes football. They've done a lot for the women's game in recent years. And I'm excited to see that continue at a domestic level for them as well.
And while I'm sure 2023 will quickly creep up on us, I mean, it does actually feel quite far away right now, perhaps because of some of the rebuilding that will need to be done between then and now in the wake of COVID-19. I mean, not just for women's football, but for all sport. But I mean, after all of the hard work that went into last year, you know, building that momentum, gathering the goodwill, and frankly, you know, capturing the attention of an awful lot of people. Did it feel a bit like, you know, in March when everything sort of started to stop, did it feel a bit like, you know, we can't catch a break? You know, did it feel almost as if this came at a particularly inopportune moment for women's football, given the trajectory it appeared to be on?
Yeah, I think I more took a view of, you know, this is something that's impacting the whole of society, and it's not something that we can change or do anything to influence. Obviously, it impacted football quite severely in terms of, you know, obviously stopping of activity. But that's across men's and women's football. It's the entire game. And, you know, at the beginning, obviously, it meant that we had to stop a lot of leagues. International windows were put on hold or cancelled. And this meant that, yes, there was a loss of a bit of the momentum in terms of activity taking place. But at the same time, I think it allowed us, or has allowed us, a chance to take a step back, which is something that is welcomed, actually, to take a step back and look at where we are, reassess, and to then put additional effort into coming back even stronger. And I think, you know, for the women's game, we have to keep a positive mindset around this. Mm-hmm. You know, I've seen a lot of media coverage and articles that are, you know, accurately depicting a dire situation for female sports. But it's important that we flip that and turn that into a positive conversation around the opportunities that actually exist when we come out of this situation. I don't like it so much in the women's game where we kind of paint ourselves into a corner as victims in many cases. That's something I strongly believe as our sport grows and we try to attract more and more people, you know, as fans and practitioners and opponents of our game. We have to really step forward with an optimistic mindset and a positive, you know, a positive outlook on it.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, a big part of that recovery process is going to require support from others as well. I know that FIFA acted very quickly in terms of coming out and saying that its $1 billion investment in women's football wasn't going to be affected by the pandemic, and more recently announced an additional grant of $500,000 that will be allocated specifically to the women's game. So, you know, why was it important for FIFA to make that statement to say that this pandemic doesn't change our long-term commitment to women's football? And in terms of that funding, what areas is it going to be applied in the coming years?
Yeah, I think it was, I was really proud actually with the way that FIFA reacted with respect to supporting the women's game throughout this coronavirus situation. As you said, you know, we had planned to invest $1 billion US dollars throughout this 4-year cycle. That hasn't been impacted by the coronavirus situation. And in fact, in addition to that, you know, we are supporting our member associations with ring-fenced funding of $500,000 US dollars per member association specifically for women's football. And, you know, as the governing body of football with the 211 member associations under us, it's important that we send a strong and powerful message that women's football remains a top priority for us. And therefore, it should remain a top priority for all of you. And, you know, that has certainly been the case in many of the member associations that I've spoken to over the past weeks and months. And, you know, this additional funding is just going to provide a great boost for those proponents or those people that are on the ground that are looking to restart and rebuild once they can come back to activity. And certainly that's something that we will be supporting them with. In terms of the funding and where we will be investing it, it's across really the entire ecosystem. I know when we spoke last night, we talked a little bit about the FIFA Women's Football Strategy. Mm-hmm. And that's really divided into 5 key areas, you know, including competitions, the development aspects of it, governance and leadership, education and capacity building. So we really will be looking to spread the investment across all those pillars. I'm a very strong believer that in order to grow our game in a sustainable way across the globe, we need to invest in all facets of the ecosystem of women's football. And that will be reflected in the way that we invest from the top down in the game at FIFA.
Yeah, I'm also glad you mentioned that women's football strategy, which was obviously announced in 2018 and that we talked about last year. There were various targets within that, including doubling participation to 60 million by 2026, among various others. Are you having to revise those targets at all as a result of what's been going on, or are you still confident that you'll be able to meet those despite that pause that we've been in?
I still have great optimism and confidence. We saw a massive boost in participation numbers after the Women's World Cup in France last year. In England alone, I think it was more than 850,000 women and girls joined, the grassroots programs around the country off the back of France. And we've seen that replicated in many other countries. So, I'm confident with the next edition of the World Cup, we're going to have that same boost in terms of interest and participation. And the key for us in between times is to continue working with the member associations in establishing sustainable activities on the ground domestically that will retain that interest, and those girls that do have their interest peaked during the World Cup cycle will have ongoing activities, competitions and leagues to participate in. Competitions for us is really the main driver in terms of participation growth, and that's where we'll be putting a lot of our effort over the next few years, building up to that deadline in 2026. Mm-hmm. So I'm confident we can still reach it. I think that, in women's football, the only place to go for us is up. And certainly after France last year and the momentum that we have, despite the coronavirus, I think that we will get there for sure.
One of the things that I took away from our chat last year was that I don't think I'd necessarily appreciated just how varied the development of women's football is in different parts of the world, especially when you compare it to men's football, which is a very commercially developed proposition kind of globally. But that's something that's true in other sports as well. So I know you've mentioned talking to your member associations, but I'm interested to know, have you been in contact with other sports at all during this time, about how you can work together and ensure that there isn't that drop-off in participation as a result of the lack of exposure that has been happening this year?
Yeah, so I have a regular meeting, and I have a network sort of going with my counterparts in World Rugby and also in cricket. Okay. And that's been going for some time now. We've established this group some years ago, and I definitely would say that during the lockdown period, the level of communication that we had certainly increased. But it's been hugely beneficial to be able to talk to my counterparts in those other sports to understand, how they are reacting, what the impacts have been for them. And as you can imagine, there are many shared experiences that we're going through. But certainly I think in general, we're all in the same position. But one thing that's really nice through these discussions that we're having is that we're all very much of the same view, that we can build on this situation and come out bigger and stronger and even better than we were before the coronavirus. And it's great to be able to pick their brains a little bit about the different initiatives that they're running. And also to share from my side, what we are doing at international level, but also working with our member countries. So it's something I really value, being able to have those discussions. And as I said earlier, across all of women's sports, we need to keep a positive mindset and be optimistic towards the future. And I think that this will make a big difference in terms of how we come back from this and how we're able to grow and leverage this as an opportunity.
We have seen some sports coming back already, but in this restart that we have been seeing, I think it would be fair to say that the men's tournaments and leagues have been somewhat prioritised. I mean, what have you made of that? We saw that first with the women's Euros being pushed back a year as a result of the Euro 2020 postponement. In this country, I don't think anyone was surprised to see the Premier League make a fist of coming back, but obviously the Women's Super League had to be cancelled. There have been some more positive examples, obviously, such as the NWSL in the States and the Women's Bundesliga in Germany. But has it surprised you at all to see the men's competitions being prioritised in sports initial recovery?
Well, I mean, as you mentioned, the men's game is obviously a lot more commercially mature than the women's game. And, a lot of that factors into the decisions that are taken on the men's side in terms of restarting. Just reading in the media and across social media, we've seen some astounding figures in terms of projected losses due to the men's game coming to a halt because of the virus. So obviously there's a kind of a different level, I would say, of or different criteria and factors that come into play in terms of the decision making around the men's game. I was in very close contact actually with the FA and talking to Kelly Simmons, who represents the FA Women's Super League within the FA, and it's interesting because the decision that was made around stopping the season was actually something that was done in full consideration with all the clubs, the stakeholders, the players. Everyone was really in agreement there. And it wasn't something that was taken lightly. Obviously, they discussed this over some time. And the truth of it is there's just different factors involved in men's and women's football. The men's game is just so far more advanced in many different ways, whereas the women's game, we're operating in a completely different landscape. And that means that we have to look at situations like this in a separate way. Taking into account, the different factors that have arisen specifically in women's football. So, yeah, obviously that has meant that some leagues have had to stop and some won't restart, and but those are things that I think have been considered with the health and safety of the participants first and foremost. As the main kind of indicator of why these decisions are taking place. And again, as I said, we have to look at it as an opportunity. We've got to build towards the next seasons, and, certainly that's something we've taken into account at FIFA level, with our calendar. We don't have any intention to make any change because we want to allow as much as possible the member associations to continue or restart or newly start the next season for their domestic leagues as a priority.
When things do start to get back to some sort of normal and sport at large is able to resume, it's going to be very cluttered. A lot of different sports will be fighting for a limited pool of attention. I know you said there that you really want to focus on the opportunities that exist for women's football. So, I mean, what do you think those are? What do you think women's football can do to recover that momentum it had last year and ensure it does still get that share of the spotlight?
Yeah, I think a lot of the ingredients that we saw in the Women's World Cup in France last year that you've sort of just mentioned, we need to be able to apply those also at a domestic level. There's a lot that we saw coming out of France around, marketing and communication around the game, having an increased digital presence, really focusing towards, building a holistic kind of communication strategy around women's football. That's not only just about what's happening on the pitch, but also captures, the unique stories that exist around the game, but also the values and the integrity that stands alongside women's football. These are things that are really attractive, I think, to not only to commercial partners and to media, but to fans as well. It's about so much more than what's on the pitch. And by creating those stories and really leveraging that, I think that, we saw it in France. We can do a lot more to boost the interest and the engagement from fans and from the public. So it's more of the same, really. Those ingredients that were there, we've seen that they work. So it's about adapting and applying them at a national and domestic level.
Sure. And I mean, 2023 will obviously play a big part in that. I think that's something a lot of people will be looking at and something you'll clearly be working towards. And obviously it wasn't the way it was intended, but I personally think it will be a nice spotlight having that happen in back-to-back years after the rescheduled Euros, which are now going to take place in 2021. But on the World Cup, I mean, last month FIFA released a report about the success of France 2019. That the 284 million euro contribution it made to French GDP, alongside the various other economic, social, and environmental benefits. And before that, we already knew that the tournament was watched by over 1 billion people. So I mean, as you look at 2023 now, and it might be hard to say given how far away it is, but just how exactly do you think that tournament can build on France 2019 and maybe even better it?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I think the fact that we've got co-hosts is already a unique element that will help to boost that level of interest and those numbers that we saw happening in France. New Zealand and Australia are both really huge sports countries. Having grown up in New Zealand and seen, directly the environment that's there in terms of the grassroots activation and interest in sports, it's massive. And it's the same in Australia. I mentioned it before, the competitive environment in Australia domestically in terms of women's sports is almost bigger than I've seen in any other country. And that's something that we'll be able to leverage for sure. Not only that, but we've got the wider Asia-Pacific region. They've never hosted a Women's World Cup in that region before. Coming from the Pacific and from Oceania, the level of contact that I've had from the different countries in that region since the announcement has been massive. It's really spread beyond the two host countries. I know in Asia, obviously, we've got countries like India who are hosting the next Under-17 Women's World Cup, as well as China, Japan. There is a huge level of interest in women's football in those surrounding regions as well. And I think, the fact that we've got a World Cup coming up where there are two confederations that are hosting, we'll be able to leverage that in a big, big way in terms of participation, interest, commercial value, building the foundation for women's football across those two regions. So I'm confident that we will see a bigger and even more successful Women's World Cup. The biggest growth opportunity we have in football is the women's game. And we'll see that reflected in this edition of the Women's World Cup, and I'm sure several of the following editions after that.
Definitely. And just before I let you go, Sarai, I've asked this to a lot of people just because I'm intrigued to know. Obviously, at the moment, things are so fluid with the situation going on in the world. So I'm just kind of interested to hear, what are your aims and goals for the rest of this year, and what do you hope to achieve?
Oh. It's a good question. Look, I think for me, really throughout the situation that we've just been through in the last few months with coronavirus, my real goal is to reconnect with our member associations and really, really support them as they come out of this coronavirus situation to give a boost to women's football at the national level in each of those countries. I think with the increase in funding that we're going to see due to the COVID relief plan that FIFA has put together, combined with some development programs that we're going to be launching very shortly for those member associations, that's really where our priorities and our efforts are going to lie, is getting girls and women back to playing football, and increasing, in fact, the number of women and girls that are playing football in those member countries is going to be our priority. So whatever we can do to support our member associations, that's what we're going to be focusing on.
Perfect. Well, we wish you luck with it. And Sarai, thank you very much for joining us on the SportsPro Podcast.
Thank you, Sam. As always, it was a pleasure.
Join the conversation with the SportsPro community. Follow us on Twitter at SportsPro. Find us on Instagram at sportspro.media. And connect to SportsPro Media on LinkedIn, where you can also become a part of our specialist OTT community. SportsPro, connecting and inspiring the business world of sport.
All right, that's it then for another SportsPro podcast. Thanks again to Lisa Baird for her time earlier on. Thanks as well to Sarai Bareman and to Sam Carp. Do be sure to head over to sportspromedia.com, where you can check out Sam's article based on that interview from a couple of weeks or so back. And take care. We'll be back with you again very soon. Bye-bye.
The SportsPro podcast is published by SportsPro Media. The producer is Ed Dixon.